The Indianapolis Colts took down the Cincinnati Bengals last week and are now whittling down their roster to 53 players. So, what's to make of Anthony Richardson's performance in Cincinnati? And who do we think makes the final 53? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Indianapolis Colts on SI.com, part of the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Andrew Moore, and as always, I'm joined here by my fellow analyst and co-host at Horseshoe Huddle, Drake Wally. Drake, the preseason is now in the books. We haven't talked to anyone here in a few days, so a lot of the commotion surrounding the Colts-Bengals game and Anthony Richardson's performance has settled down. But we're going to talk about it here tonight anyways. But the big thing on tap is by 4 p.m. tomorrow, the Indianapolis Colts have to be down to 53 players from the 91 that they had just last Friday.
Yeah, and there's still so many players to cut down. That's the craziest part of all this, and that's why it's such an absolutely hectic time for everyone, including people who cover the team, because you have to have like a tracker and everything else set up because you just can't do consistent pieces because so many things happen. But we've got a lot to talk about. You know, you and I, we've kind of come up with our final 53. That's why we were a little late. We were trying to kind of hash out the details because this is a really big deal. There are so many names that I think could help the Colts that they're still going to have to say no to.
Exactly. So it's going to be a fun discussion to kind of talk about the various players that could make the 53-man roster, the various players that we think aren't going to make the 53-man roster. What are the Colts going to do at quarterback? Because as the chat is already showing, there's already a discussion in there about what the Indianapolis Colts are going to do, whether they keep a third quarterback or not. I want to give a shout out to Truitt for the super sticker. Really appreciate all of your support. And Truitt says, as the great philosopher Sting said, if you love someone, set them free. Hashtag Ellinger. So it sounds like Truitt is on board with letting Sam Ellinger go. Wyatt Law Ellinger is almost like a son to Chris Ballard. Cutting him would be excruciatingly painful. I think he'd prefer trading Sam to a quality situation out of affection for the young man. So looks like someone in the chat are talking about letting Ellinger go. We're going to be talking about whether we think the Colts are keeping a third quarterback or not. Of course, Stats Matt is here. What's up? We finally know the team tomorrow, plus or minus a waiver claim or two. Yes, the Colts are usually active in the waiver wire after these roster cut downs. So after tomorrow, we'll have the original 53-man roster, but there's usually still a few more moves to come. Sean Contright is here, as well as Sarah. Go Colts. I'm hoping Tucker makes it. Dalton Tucker has had a very impressive preseason. So it's going to be interesting to see who all makes it as we finally see the full roster for the Indianapolis Colts. But if you haven't done so, please go follow us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts_SI on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know whenever Drake and I go live, whenever Noah goes live with the Shoehorn Podcast. You never want to miss us. And then if you can't catch us live, wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, make sure you give us a 5-star review and write a review. Give us 5 stars, subscribe, do all the things on there as well. So Drake, let's first, before we dive into our roster predictions, we got to at least touch on the Colts taking down the Bengals 27-14 on Thursday night. Now, if you guys follow Drake and I on X, you know we did a gut reaction breakdown to the game on the Bleacher Report app on Thursday night, but we're going to dive into it a little bit further on here in case you weren't able to catch that. And of course, the big storyline, Drake, was Anthony Richardson and his play. First drive comes out there. The Colts go right down the field and score. Anthony Richardson goes 7 for 8 and gets that touchdown throw to Adonai Mitchell. Was making very quick decisions with the football, was accurate with the football, and the offense was humming right down the field. Then the second drive, miscommunication to Kylan Granson, ends up being a pick six. The third drive, a drop by Michael Pittman, an overthrow to Adonai Mitchell, and a 3-and-out. So after that first drive, Richardson went 1 for 6 after that first drive to finish with 8 of 14, 86 yards, the touchdown and the interception. Now, it seemed like there were two schools of thought, really a good split on this, Drake. You had one half saying, it's just preseason. I mean, you don't have to necessarily look into it. There's going to be peaks and valleys, ups and downs with the rookie quarterback as he goes through. Then you had another side of the story where people were saying, I'm out on Anthony Richardson, and saying that the Colts are doomed. He can't be the starting quarterback, and including former quarterbacks coming out on X and saying that Anthony Richardson is doesn't look like a starter. And our good friend Logan Schmidt had quite the spat with that person on Twitter. That's why Logan is the absolute GOAT. If you're listening tonight, buddy. But Drake, just give me your overall thoughts on the performance of Anthony Richardson in that game against Cincinnati Bengals, and tell me, are you worried about number 5 as we head into the season?
Oh, I think that the performance was up and down. All right, you had two separate ends of a performance here, but I don't think there's any reason to really freak out over this. I mean, yes, all right, you missed some throws, okay, but that was the most action he has seen since he got hurt. Okay, so like, there's new things too. There's AD Mitchell is in this offense now. There's new, little things that I'm sure Shane Steichen has added to Anthony Richardson's things to study and to develop him as the quarterback with. So I'm not worried about a rough preseason game. I mean, I'm just not, so I don't care if it was against second, third, fourth teamers, you miss a couple throws. If you look across the preseason, you're going to see some of that too. So it's like, I'm not worried about it at all. You don't even get to use your legs in this game. I mean, we really didn't even get to see Anthony Richardson use his legs, and then the defense have to deal with that, which I promise you, things are going to be even more open than they were in that game when he's running with the football too. So while it was a rocky performance at the end there, I thought he started off as hot as he possibly can. He just has to be more consistent, hit those layup throws, which he will. He's going to work on that. And then I'm just not worried about a preseason performance where a couple of things didn't go right.
I think people want to see, they just really want to see Anthony Richardson take off. And because we've been building expectations for Anthony Richardson since last October, I think again we need to kind of take a step back. And Drake, I think we're guilty of this as well as in our conversations that we've had on the show.
Oh yeah,
there's gonna be ups and downs with Anthony Richardson because, in a sense, he is still a rookie quarterback. He only played 4 games last season. So again, he's only 22 years old. If Drake May doesn't start for the New England Patriots in week 1, Anthony Richardson, for the second year in a row, will be the youngest starting quarterback in the NFL in week 1. That's big. That means something. So that first drive was absolutely fantastic, crisp. The ball was coming out on time. It was coming out very accurately. The second drive, simple miscommunication. That's gonna happen. I saw a lot of people saying that, and including I saw this I think the day after on Sports Center. I saw Herm Edwards talking about the inaccuracy on that throw. Immediately turned it off, because like Herm Edwards, as a coach, you should know better when you see a miscommunication versus when you see an inaccurate throw. The Granson and Richardson just weren't on the same page. It's as simple as that.
They saw that on the live broadcast.
That'll get fixed. Exactly. That'll get fixed. It's going to take some time. Richardson is still working with his receivers. Those miscommunications, that gets fixed. Shane Steichen even said that falls on the coaches and the players to teach that better and to execute that better. And some of the inaccuracies, again, we're just kind of working with the footwork. It wasn't exactly lining up properly. From there, it did seem like after the interception, Anthony Richardson was also trying to press a little bit. I think probably this comes out, I made that mistake. I want to go out there and avenge that mistake, and that's natural for a young quarterback to feel. Overall, I mean, I'm not going to take too much from this performance. I'm not taking too much from anything in the preseason. Bill Belichick today on Pat McAfee's show, and I really agree with this. Bill Belichick has said, you don't really get anything from the preseason. The coaches and everyone in the building, you get more out of the practices and in the training camp than you do out of these preseason games. Again, the offense was very vanilla. The quarterback run game was never even incorporated into this. There wasn't a specific game plan. The Colts are just out there running their basic concepts. So there isn't anything to be worried about. This is just what life is going to be like for the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts are going to have, or Anthony Richardson, is going to have some ups and downs as he learns the NFL game. There are going to be some games where he goes out there and absolutely dominates. Other games he's going to struggle, and that's okay. You want him to go through these ups and downs so he can learn from these mistakes, and then you want to just see consistency throughout the season. You don't want to see the same mistakes committed over and over and over again. And so far, in the small sample size that we have been able to see Anthony Richardson, that doesn't really happen. You don't see him make the same mistakes over and over again, or make the same mistakes very often at all. He's just continuing to learn. And this is just going to happen, guys. It's just the reality of having a young quarterback. The guy that Anthony Richardson is compared to the most, in Josh Allen, he certainly went through that in his first year or two in the league. The guy that Shane Steichen was working with previously, in Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts went through that as well, the ups and downs in his first season as a starter. It all just comes with a young quarterback. And while I think the Colts, and this has been said by others too, that the Colts have a really high floor just because of Anthony Richardson's athletic ability in the run game, there's still going to be ups and downs. So we do need to just be patient. I think be a little bit more realistic out of what we expect out of Anthony Richardson this season.
Yeah, it's a lot to learn, man. And you get the best version of that learning when you're on the field doing it week in, week out. So when it stops after week 5 and you're sitting there for the next 13 weeks, and then throughout the off season, and then you finally start going through training camp, yeah, it's a little different when you have a crowd around you and you're in there for almost a half. But I do want to point out something that, what matters are the joint practices. Joint practices matter. And people, guess what? Our own Jake Arthur had an incredible tweet. After 13 training camp practices, including the final 3 being joint practices with the Cardinals, Bengals, and with the Cardinals and Bengals, I had Colts QB Anthony Richardson at 92 of 143, 64% passing, with 10 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and 5 rushing scores. That sounds like he took pretty good care of the football by all standards. And plus, there's also going to be, in those certain cases, chances taken with plays that Steichen wants to see what happens with it. So it's like, I just didn't really get too worried about those plays in the preseason. I want to like highlight the positives here. The guy absolutely was blistering in that open drive. I think that the defense, because the Cincinnati Bengals, is it Lou Omano is their defensive coordinator? I can't remember. He's like one of the most well-respected in the entire league. He probably switched up just something ever so slightly on Richardson, and Richardson did miss some open throws, and that's just going to happen. You're still ironing this stuff out. Like you said, he's 22 years old, man. He's kind of still a rookie.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the defense, because the Colts defense really played well against the Bengals. Again, going up against the backups, really focusing in on that first team defense. The defense as a whole only allowed 7 points. The Colts starting defense didn't allow us any points. It was a shutout for them. Latu in his first snap next to DeForest Buckner got a sack. Jannard Avery with a sack. But overall, Drake, the Colts defense looked really stout. I mean, even talking about guys in coverage, like Darrell Baker Jr. making some plays. Chris Lamons made some plays out there. The Colts defense just looked like they are ready to go. They're out there flying, and that's what you want to see. You want the defense to be ready to go once the regular season hits, especially since C.J. Stroud and the Texans are coming to Lucas Oil Stadium in week 1.
Yeah, and they didn't – I mean, we talked about it in our last episode. They didn't allow any offensive touchdown until the fourth quarter. I mean, the defense, they really – I mean, even the depth guys, the guys fighting for roster spots, man, they played, and all the way up to Latu, who got his first NFL career sack. I mean, that's just awesome. So I'm excited to see especially that defensive front and just what they're going to do. The linebackers are solid. The real question mark, though, Andrew, it's still the cornerbacks. I think the cornerbacks, it sticks out even farther than safety to me. So we'll see.
Yeah. And obviously, Juju Brents did not play because of the nose injury. Kenny Moore was his normal self. Jalen Jones made some really good plays on the football out there, which is good to see. It's more the back half of this secondary and how it shakes out. That's what it's going to be. That's what's going to be interesting when we inevitably see this roster come out tomorrow. Wyatt Law says, to my untrained yet appreciative eye, Nick Cross is a natural strong safety. He's a missile in the running game and hits with purpose. It's funny you said that, Wyatt Law, because against the Arizona Cardinals, yes, he did play primarily strong safety, and then on Thursday night when Julian Blackmon was playing. Julian Blackmon was primarily the strong safety, and we saw Nick Cross back at the free safety position. So, Drake, I think we're going to see. I think we're going to see various, I think depending on the opponent is what we're going to see these two play. I really think it's going to be pretty interchangeable seeing Julian Blackmon at free safety or a strong safety, excuse me, Nick Cross at free safety. I think that's primarily where those guys are going to play, but we could see a game where Nick Cross plays mostly strong safety and Julian Blackmon is back there at free. I think the reason for that is because you do have Nick Cross that can play, is probably more comfortable at strong safety, but you need in this defense a veteran, the guy that is best at communicating in the back end. That's when we've seen the Colts have the most success, when they have that type of player at strong safety, such as Rodney McLeod or a Julian Blackmon. Now, there are times where I think the coverage ability of Julian Blackmon being that kind of that deep safety may help as well. You might need to have, as Wyatt said, kind of a missile in the running game. So if the Colts are able to use them interchangeably and still keep up the playmaking that Blackmon brings, and Nick Cross is able to continue to develop and brings out the best in Nick Cross, I think that's the best way to move forward with the safety position for the Colts this season.
Yeah, and I think that they've just been trying to find the best fit for Cross. But like you said, I think that they feel that both these guys can play interchangeably, and they're just going to approach it per game. And like you said, if there's a team that's got a strong running game, maybe you keep Blackmon in his natural spot. But then if there's a team that you feel like Cross can keep up with the receivers, you're more comfortable with him at free safety. I mean, we'll get into it, but right now the Colts on their depth chart have him at free safety and Blackmon at strong. So we'll see.
Exactly. Stats, Matt says, I believe the Colts first team defense gave up 24 yards in 16 plays. That defense was definitely getting after it on Thursday night. And then we've got another stat from NFL Nerd. Good to see you, my friend. Latu's preseason PFF grade was a 78.6 with a 30.8% pass rush win rate. That is absolutely absurd. And if Latu, he's not going to be able to, but if he can bring even a 20 to 25% pass rush win rate into the NFL in the regular season, my God, look out. You've got a special player out there. So Drake, as we wrap up the talk on the Cincinnati Bengals, just give me 3 standouts from that game that you thought really did a good job, whether it was with the specific plays that they made or just their all-around solid performance. Who were the 3 standouts in your opinion from the Colts game against the Bengals?
Yeah, so I went ahead and went with the other guy who got a sack. I'm going to give Jannard Avery some props here. You know, he's had some injuries and he's still fighting. He's still on the roster. So he really stood out. Jalen Carley's looked really good naturally in that coverage setting in those 19 snaps. And then Tyler Goodson, man, I tell you what, he won't go away. That drop against Houston, I think that he completely has just nullified that to me. He looked explosive yet again, led the team in rushing yards. So I think that those are my 3 that stood out.
Yeah, Tyler Goodson definitely has stood out all preseason long, and he has earned a spot on this roster. It's been a very good preseason for Tyler Goodson. He was definitely one of my standouts. Jalen Jones, I have Jalen Jones out there as another standout. Really good in coverage. Again, it's not like the Colts weren't going up against T. Higgins and Jamar Chase out there, but Jalen Jones did his thing in coverage, which is what you want to see. And then finally, I'm going to give it to A.D. Mitchell. I thought Adonai Mitchell did a really good job of just assimilating himself in the offense. Richardson was looked his way quite a bit, and his ability to kind of get open, take that crosser that across the goal line. A little bit of an excessive tackle for a preseason on Mitchell, but he bounced right back up. I think Adonai Mitchell did a really good job against the Cincinnati Bengals. So with the preseason now in the rearview mirror, Drake, it is time to make our predictions for the 53-man roster. And guys, as we go through these positions, we're going to go position by position here. As we go through them, throw your predictions in the chat as well for each position group. We want to see what you guys are thinking as well. And we're going to start out with the quarterback position here, Drake, because of course we're going to start out with the quarterback position. And there has been a lot of talk really about that third quarterback spot Will it be Sam Ellinger? Will it be Jason Bean? Keaton Slovis has already been cut and released, so he is kind of out of the equation. And then to add another layer to this, all preseason long, we had talked about that the emergency quarterback could come off of the practice squad. That is no longer. The NFLPA vetoed that rule. They had the ability to do that. So now the emergency third quarterback has to be on the roster. It cannot be a guy that is on the practice squad and gets elevated on game day every single week. They have to be on the active roster, which definitely changes things as far as how you're going to construct your roster. So when we look at the quarterback position, Drake, I think the Colts do keep 3 quarterbacks. They did it last year. They really have made this a thing in the Chris Ballard era. And it's going to be obviously Anthony Richardson, Joe Flacco, and guys, it's going to be Sam Ellinger. I know there's a lot of Jason Bean fans out there, but Sam Ellinger has been in this system for this will be his second year, but he's been with the Colts for 4. There really wasn't ever a push. Jason Bean never really pushed. Keaton Slovis never did either. Push Sam Ellinger for that third quarterback spot in training camp, and we saw that in the preseason game as well. Ellinger was by far and away the third quarterback, getting the reps with that second and third teams where Bean and Slovis played cleanup. That's exactly what happened throughout the preseason. I know that people would like Jason Bean to be there, and there's still a chance that he could be on the practice squad. But if the Colts do keep a third quarterback, it's going to be Sam Ellinger.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, because if you, and I always go back to this, I understand that the ceiling for Bean is definitely higher than Ellinger, and that's not even close in my opinion. I think that Bean is a burner. There's a reason they had him as a QB / wide receiver, is because the guy is so freaking quick. But man, I saw Ellinger do some incredible pocket navigation. When the blocking wasn't working, Kirk Herbstreit said it so well. He's just really calm. He just operates within the system. He just tries not to go too far outside of it, which, guess what, people, as a QB3, if you have to dip into your third quarterback, you want him to operate within the system, and you don't want him to be some flashy guy. You want to try to get just wins, scrape by if you can. So I think that they trust him. They know him better, and it's nothing against Bean, but maybe they keep him on the practice squad. I think ultimately that's up to him if he wants to do that, or if he wants to, fulfill that number 1 pick and, be in the UFL.
Yeah, Jason Bean, I think, is a good developmental quarterback that you can have on your practice squad, a guy that you can use to game plan. But here's the thing, Sam Ellinger there hasn't been a competition. It's never been close between Bean and Slovis and Ellinger. Ellinger's always the third quarterback out there. The Colts love Sam Ellinger. He has starting experience, which the others don't have. I don't think it's even really a competition. It's even a competition. Sam Ellinger will be the third quarterback. Drake, let's go to running back, where there could be some discrepancies in the number of running backs. Do they keep 3? Do they keep 4? What do you have as far as the running backs making this Colts roster?
So I really think that they're going to keep 4. I think that they like what they see, obviously, in Trey Sermon. And once he returns, he is going to be that RB2. But I think that Evan Hull and I think that Tyler Goodson have both absolutely claimed roster spots. I mean, especially Tyler Goodson, man. I'm incredibly impressed by the way that after so many narratives of, this guy dropped that pass, he goes out there and he has an incredibly effective preseason. He looked good in training camp. He's just looked good really ever since that happened. So I think that they will go with 4, because that also gives you so many different ways to attack a defense and use Anthony Richardson with multiple backs.
Yeah, I think 4 running backs is the move as well. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor is the bell cow. Trey Sermon is the running back too. I had someone on Twitter ask me if Trey Sermon was if I was sure if Trey Sermon was a lock to make the roster. Yes, Trey Sermon's a lock to make the roster. Trey Sermon is running back too. And then I think Tyler Goodson and Evan Hull both make it as well. I think as of right now, Tyler Goodson is the running back 3. He's the one that's been getting the most reps. He's been getting the reps ahead of those 2. And he's really proven it in the preseason, and in training camp. He's been really, really solid. So those are my 4 running backs in Taylor, Sermon, Goodson, and Hull. All right, Drake, do you think that those are going to be your 4 running backs as well? Do we have Hall and Goodson making it, or do you have a surprise making it? Because I know you're a big Xavier Scott fan as well.
Well, it's like I said, I think that I really think that it could be a chance for him, but it's only if they're going to keep somehow 5 running backs. I think that while Scott did look great, they're still trying to he's more of a utility guy in my opinion. And I think that Tyler Goodson just fits more of a running back. He can pass catch really well. I just think there's more explosiveness there. Don't get me wrong. I love Xavier Scott, but I just think unless one of those guys gets hurt, knock on wood, I don't think you're going to see Scott on the roster. He's going to be a practice squad guy.
Yes, he will be a practice squad. Wyatt Law asking, do we need Hull and Goodson as our change-up backs? Would it be smarter to keep Xavier Scott as a bigger, more Sermon-like back?
I see why you asked that now.
I mean, Scott can still be that on the practice squad, but you don't need a backup to Trey Sermon. Okay, Trey Sermon's already a backup. You like what Goodson has as far as his ability to play special teams as well, special teams, and his ability to accelerate the Hull. And Hull, you're a former 5th round pick, fantastic as a receiving option. And as Patrick said, Scott only makes it if Sermon gets placed on the 2-man IR reserve. Even then, I don't even know if that would be the case. I think the Colts at that point would just run with 3 running backs and then be able to take someone else at a different position as well, because you can sneak Xavier Scott. You can cut him and sneak him through waivers pretty easily back onto the practice squad. But Trey Sermon, as Shane Steichen has said, should be back next week, which is really good to see. On to the wide receivers, Drake. This is a position I have been saying has been locked up since before training camp. Some people were wondering if the Colts were going to maybe switch out Ashton Doolin for someone like Laquan Treadwell or DJ Montgomery. I don't see it. I think it's Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell, Alec Pierce, Ashton Doolin, and Anthony Gould. I think those are the 6 wide receivers that the Colts will keep. Now, I think the closest out of those to making the roster would probably be Montgomery as far as the wide receivers that aren't going to be picked, because Montgomery, his ability to play special teams as well as he's a coach's favorite. He's been really, really solid. I think he would be that 7th guy, but Montgomery probably reverts to the practice squad, and as well as guys like Laquan Treadwell, unless he gets picked up to go somewhere else. Another guy like Jawan Winfrey could possibly come in to play special teams, but he's probably a practice squad guy. So I think the original 6 that we had talked about, that's who the Colts end up sticking with.
Yeah, look, man, DJ Montgomery, he's a dog. I mean, the guy just does what you ask him to do. He goes out there and he does his job. But the thing is, last year he was on and off the practice squad and on and off waivers, and then he was back on the roster. So the Colts, they think highly enough of him, but I just don't think that he's going to be one of those 6 guys. So I agree. I think Gould's going to be the 6th guy, because you want that guy as a returner, but you also want to be able to use him potentially as, a gadget player. But real quick, I want to address the Laquan Treadwell stuff. So he went 9 for 9 in his last 2 season games. Targets, caught all of them. People were like, great hands. Okay, I get it. He's a 1st rounder, people, playing against 3rd and 4th and whoever else the Bengals and other teams had on their roster. He should do that. He should absolutely cook everybody out there. So he was still playing with Jason Bean, though. So I don't think that unless they can put him on the practice squad, I think Treadwell is going to be gone. But six for that position too. So that now we are now at 13 for the roster.
Exactly. Wyatt Law is asking what impact on the types of special teams guys does the new kickoff rules have? It absolutely does have an impact on the types of guys that they keep. If you can't, again, this happens every year. If you can't play special teams and you're trying to fight for the back end of the roster, the chances of you making the roster are much slimmer than a guy that can play special teams. That's where you see these guys making the roster and why one guy might be picked over the other, because if he plays special teams or plays it at a higher level, he's going to make the roster to do that rather than somebody else.
Yeah.
All right, Drake. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say that you've seen so many players just make their name initially for the Colts, especially just by playing special teams. So.
Exactly. And like at the wide receiver position, Ashton Doolin, when healthy, he's one of the best gunners on the team. Anthony Gould is going to be this team's punt returner and one of the kickoff return guys as well, whether it's Dallas Flowers, who'll probably be the other kick returner back there. But Gould has already cemented himself as one of the returners for this team. Now we move to tight end. And Drake, this decision got a lot easier with the injury to Jelani Woods. I think the Colts keep 4. They will keep Kylan Granson, Mo Alley Cox, Drew Ogletree, and Will Mallory. And because of the new rule that allows the Colts to keep a guy or to put a guy on IR on roster cut down day rather than taking him onto the 53-man roster before putting him on IR, the Colts will be able to keep Jelani Woods, will not have to get rid of any of the tight ends out there. And they'll be able to allow Jelani Woods to hopefully get healthy, as it's been reported now he's going to be out close to 4 months. Maybe he returns for a late playoff push. We'll have to see. But it definitely made the tight end decision much easier with Woods suffering this injury.
Yeah, and you don't want to go with 5 at this point. Not saying Eric Tomlinson as a blocking tight end in years in the NFL couldn't do something for you, or Jordan Murray, who had some good plays in the preseason, couldn't do something for you. But that's where you're dipping into like your practice squad tight ends. You're like, okay, we need some serious help here. But I agree with you. I think that you've got Granson's going to get the most snaps. Alley Cox is probably going to be more of the inline guy, and then Ogletree and him will kind of go back and forth. But Will Mallory now, that's going to be interesting because now I think more target share could go to him because of that opportunity. Now that one less tight end is on the depth chart, we'll see what happens, but that's definitely the most explosive of that position room.
If Mallory stays healthy, that's just the biggest thing. Him staying healthy, that's what he needs, and then he can get a bigger role in this offense. Because when he was healthy, he was starting to get a good rapport with Anthony Richardson. Shout out to my beautiful wife Danielle for her nightly super sticker from the big boy himself, from Jackson. Already Legend. 3 months old, guys. He's now all about to roll over. He's talking like crazy. The dude has found his voice, and he just doesn't stop. So really, really appreciate all of your support. And then, of course, we've got it from, as Patrick says, from me, the CFO of the Horseshoe Huddle podcast and of Horseshoe Huddle in general, Patrick Rye. Thank you so much, buddy, for the $10 super chat. And here's a good question. Anyone else shocked that the NFLPA voted down the proposed new third quarterback rule? Seems like that would force out a 53rd guy for a third QB to make the team less jobs for other positions. And that's a good point, Patrick. I think it is. I also think that you could look at it a different way as well, where teams are thinking, we don't have to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster, so that means that more quarterbacks would be relegated to the practice squad, or I think it also could be, when you're on the practice squad, you definitely don't get paid as much as you do if you're on the active roster. So it's almost like these teams are getting more work out of a guy on the practice squad for less money. I think that potentially could have played a role into it as well. I was a little bit shocked myself. I didn't think that was something that the NFLPA was going to veto and shoot down, especially this late in the process. But I think the biggest reason for that is that the NFLPA wouldn't want the teams to take advantage of that by kind of having a de facto 54th player on the roster, but only paying them practice squad money. That's at least my wild guess. I don't have any information on that, but that's kind of what I was thinking. What do you think, Drake? Why do you think the NFLPA voted this rule down?
Well, the example that you brought up about having a glorified 54th guy, I think that is probably the biggest reason. I will say I was a little bit thrown off because it makes so much sense to do this. I think it does help teams, especially. I mean, you go back to, I can't remember when it was, but you had freaking was it KJ Hamler was playing quarterback for the freaking Broncos, man. Dude's a wide receiver out there playing quarterback. So, I mean, I think that's kind of when you started to see this take shape. Because, there were people that were like, all right, they're not going to win that game, So I think it would help teams, but I can also see the other side of the coin where, like you said, if you got a guy, you're putting him on the roster, dropping him off, putting him on, dropping him off, paying him practice squad money, that kind of doesn't seem fair either. So.
Exactly. Really good question, Patrick. Yeah. And I think it'll be interesting to kind of see if more information comes out about this as to why the NFLPA put this down. Stats Matt says, I believe Andrew is right. They said they didn't think it was fair to stash players on the practice squad.
That's fair.
So I think that could potentially be why this deal this rule got shot down. We'll have to see if it changes in the future. But great question, Patrick. And again, as always, appreciate all of your support for the show, for Drake and myself. You're an absolute legend and one of the goats of our crew here. So Drake, let's talk about the offensive line. Now we're kind of finishing off the offensive side of the football. For me, I'm going 9 guys deep. We obviously got the starters: Bernard Ryman, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, and Braden Smith. Obvious locks there. You've got your 2 tackles, the guys that are still vying for that swing tackle spot in Blake Freeland and Matt Gonzalez. Those guys make the roster. With the injuries to Wesley French and others, Tanner Bortolini, I think, while he wasn't really in jeopardy, just makes him more of a lock. And I think Tanner Bortolini becomes that backup center to Ryan Kelly. And then the final spot, the final offensive lineman, I'm going with Dalton Tucker. Dalton Tucker, the undrafted rookie free agent out of Marshall, has had a phenomenal camp and preseason. He has inside flexibility, can play all 3 positions, guard and center in there. And he's a guy that was just dominance a little bit strong, but he was fantastic in his role throughout the preseason, whether it was in the run game or the pass game. This guy went out there and earned his spot, and so you can have Tucker play both guard spots for you with Bortolini there at the center. Those are the 9 guys I think the Colts are going to run with this year. And as Ryan Kelly said the other day, this is the most talented offensive line group that he's ever been with, college or pro.
So you had 4 of the tackles, 4 of the guards, and basically Kelly is the center.
4 tackles, 3 guards, and then I have 2 centers and Bortolini can also play guard as well.
That's right. So we are actually on track. We have 26 at this point, which is just a hair under half of the roster. Look, man, I don't even need to get into the starters here. I want to talk just a hair about Dalton Tucker. I think that, it's awesome, number one, that he comes from Marshall, because now you've got a teammate already on the team that he knows in Micah Abraham. So I think that's pretty great. But also, number 2 is the guy just not only does he look like he fits the Colts, but with the bald head and the long biker beard, but the guy plays.
I'm halfway there. I got the bald head, the biker beard. Hey, I need some work on the beard to get there, but I'm halfway there at least.
Yeah, like Tucker embodies what Tony Sperano Jr. wants to do with the offensive line. And when you're a guard, you have to be an absolute animal when you're blocking. And I think that he fits that really well. So I agree with you, man. I think that you need to put a lot of investment into your offensive line. I will say there was one guy do you have Jake Witt making the roster?
I do not. I have Jake Witt going to probably being a practice squad guy, but Jake Witt was mostly playing with the 3rd team offensive line. Those guys are really practice squads. So Jake Witt never got any look at the 2nd team. I think the Colts, he was injured all last year. That kind of took a year away out of his development. He's still quite a ways away, I think, from making an impact on the roster.
Very fair. Well, in that case, we are right on par with each other at 26.
Let's go to the defensive side of the football with the defensive line. And Drake, I'm doing 9 again, starting with the edge position. Again, this I think decision was made a little bit easier with Samson Ebukam going down with a torn Achilles. I think the Colts since they haven't done so yet, all signs point to the Colts doing the same thing with Samson Ebukam as I think they're going to do with Jelani Woods. Just in case, and it's very highly unlikely that Samson Ebukam does return, there have been more and more players making quicker returns from Achilles injuries than in the past. So the Colts will probably move Samson Ebukam to IR tomorrow, so that way he can return at some point in the regular season if he's able to. But the 5 edge players I'm keeping, obviously Kwity Paye and Leatu Latu, Taekwon Lewis, Dio Dangbo. I'm giving that final spot to Isaiah Land. I think Isaiah Land has done enough in the preseason. He's really shown out, can be a really good Leo. A little bit undersized, but man, he's a great pass rusher. So I think Isaiah Land gets that final spot. And then at defensive tackle, DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, obviously Raekwon Davis is your first defensive tackle off the bench. Then Adetomo Adebawore. Adebawore has had a fantastic preseason. He's really taken that jump this second year, and not only is just as a pass rusher, but as a run defender as well. I think Adebawore has taken a big jump in all areas of his game. Those are my defensive linemen. Sayonara to Taven Bryan. Hopefully he doesn't come back. With other guys like Eric Johnson, Jernard Avery, I think you could find those guys on the practice squad potentially. Titus Leo, but those are my D linemen. What about you, Drake?
I'm actually, because I had to keep track, but we're on par. And I think that one guy that I really am intrigued by is Jonah Laulu, but I think that he makes a little bit more sense. I think even Stephen Holder had mentioned this, that he's just more of like your practice squad guy right now, because you can develop him, because you're just too loaded right now at your defensive front to need to force him on the roster, kind of develop him as that seventh rounder. But I love letting Bryan go. I know that it's it's harsh to say this, but man, Taven Bryan was a former first rounder, and up to this point has just been nothing but a bust. Okay. And so I think that as a run defender, he's atrocious. I think as a pass rusher, which he's supposed to have the strength in, he's not even that great in that. So I think Adetomo Adebawore is what Taven Bryan, what the Colts wanted him to be when they re-signed him.
Yeah. And I agree there with Laulu. I think, as I wrote in rookie files on Laulu, he's a guy that started out as a defensive end. That was his primary position in college, and moved to defensive tackle. He's only played there a couple of seasons, so he's still trying to fill out his body. Laulu was performing, was getting some snaps with the second team, but mostly with the third team. So I don't think he's as far away as some people might think. But yeah, obvious candidate for the practice squad, and I think potentially down the road we could see Laulu on the 53-man roster. To the linebacker group, Drake, and I'm only going 5. I'm only going 5 deep with the linebackers. With your starters, Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed, Jalen Carlisle is going to be that third linebacker that when the Colts are in their base, Jalen Carlisle will come in and play the will. EJ Speed will be at the Sam, and then when the Colts go into nickel and dime and more of their sub packages, that's when you'll see EJ Speed move back to the will. But those are the top 3. And then I've got Saguna Luby, who is basically a Zaire Franklin light, to be your backup might. And then Patrick Wire. Patrick Wire's favorite player, Grant Stewart. Grant Stewart is the final linebacker, the core special teamer that he is, best special teams player, or one of the best special teams players in the entire NFL. Those are my 5 linebackers there. And I think that's a solid group that you can really build upon.
Yeah, and I also have 5. I really wanted to give Cameron McGrone a roster spot, man. I thought he played so good during the preseason, looked great in coverage too, and made a lot of key tackles. But look, man, if there were no special teams, I think he would beat out Grant Stewart. Okay, but here's the thing: there are special teams in the NFL, and it's going to become more dynamic now. So you need those players. And I also think if you had to plug and play Grant Stewart, by all rights, he's had nothing but great preseason performances too. So if he had to plug and play, he could probably provide some spark there as well.
Yeah, I agree. Now we move to cornerback, and cornerback, Drake, was one of the hardest positions for me.
Yeah.
And I this one could be controversial with my picks, and chat, let me know how wrong you think I am. But I'm going to keep 6 cornerbacks. Obviously, Kenny Moore the second, Juju Brents, Jalen Jones as the starters. Dallas Flowers is that first cornerback off the bench. But for my 5th cornerback, I am going with Darrell Baker Jr. because Darrell Baker Jr. does play special teams. He has starting experience with the Colts, and again, didn't have the best, or I didn't I guess I should say, didn't have a bad training camp. He had actually a decent training camp and showed out in the preseason. So I think Darrell Baker Jr. makes the team. And I'm going with Chris Lamons as the backup nickel. So while Mike Abraham was the backup nickel for a bit there, as soon as Chris Lamons came back from injury, Chris Lamons took back over that backup corner, that backup nickel role, and we never really saw Mike Abraham working with the second team after that. So my cornerbacks go Moore, Brents, Jones, Flowers, Baker, Lamons. And that means Jalen Simpson doesn't make the team. Mike Abraham doesn't make the team. Both those guys, obviously, I think the Colts would love to bring back and kind of develop them on the practice squad. But as far as the 53-man roster goes, those guys aren't going to make the cut.
Yeah, and look, I think that at this point we're gonna even out. Now, I also kept 6 cornerbacks because you just have to. I mean, my God, you can't short yourself even one cornerback with this group with how young they are. So I like what you said about Chris Lamons, though, because I was so high on Micah Abraham, and look, I still am. All right, I still am. But here's the thing. I don't know if he's ready for CJ Stroud. I don't know if he's ready for Trevor Lawrence. I don't know if he's even ready for Will Levis. Okay, I know he made some plays out there, especially against the Broncos. But I also think there's a chance if he gets thrown out there too soon, he could get just destroyed. I mean, I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but I think that you need to develop him a little more. I think he's not as athletic as Chris Lamons. I don't think that he's as big as Chris Lamons. Some of these receivers are going to absolutely manhandle him. So I think that if you put him on the practice squad, if you can keep him on the practice squad and develop him, and maybe Lamons is struggling, maybe you swap those guys. Okay. It's all about just kind of thinking long-term, but I like what you said there. Go ahead and keep Chris Lamons. And if you can retain Jalen Simpson and Micah Abraham somehow, that'd be great, but it's not guaranteed, unfortunately.
Exactly. So are you going with the same 6 cornerbacks that I am? Okay.
Oh,
Yeah. So guys like Amir Speed doesn't make the team along with Jalen Simpson and Mike Abraham. But again, I think the Colts would love to have those guys back on the practice squad. Another super chat from the CFO, Patrick. Thank you so much, buddy, for all of your support. Patrick says Micah Abraham is going to be this year's Sterling Weatherford / Darius Rush, the camp fan favorites that get cut, I fear. And I don't think this is the end of the road for Mike Abraham with the Colts, because I could very well see, a year on the practice squad, a year just developing, Mike Abraham could be the backup nickel next season, as early as next season, to Kenny Moore and beat out Chris Lamons. And as we know, that cornerback spot, injuries are bound to happen at cornerback. So you want to have guys that you can bring up from the practice squad, like an Amir Speed, like a Mike Abraham and a Jalen Simpson. So I don't think that this is the end of the road for him, but I just don't think Mike Abraham is quite there yet for the Colts to keep him on the 53-man roster when you're looking at the other guys that they currently have.
Yeah, and he just needs time to develop. Like, I don't think he's ready for the number 1 receivers and the Nico Collinses and Stephon Diggs. I just think he would kind of get cooked. So if they can keep him on the practice squad somehow, that'd be ideal, because I think you might have something there.
And Patrick is making another prediction. He says, and like Rush and Weatherford, Abraham isn't going to get through waivers back to the Colts. We'll definitely have to see. That's always a risk when at this time of year. So NFL nerd shouting you out. Drake thought this was a football show, and Drake is making it a gun show. Nice. You love to see it. So we appreciate you, NFL nerd. Wyatt Law asking, before we go on to the safeties, he said Simpson and Abraham could clear waivers to get signed to the practice squad, but I do wonder if Simpson might be considered to return to free safety. That's not in the cards. I know that Simpson has played safety in the past. The Colts have given him 0 reps at safety since they drafted him. They are planning on him to be a cornerback and solely a cornerback. So Jalen Simpson as a free safety in the NFL, it's not, at least with the Indianapolis Colts, it's not going to be in the cards. But what is in the cards at the safety position, Drake, Julian Blackmon and Nick Cross as the starters. Those guys, obviously Cross won the battle in training camp, really wasn't even close as far as Cross outperforming those other guys. And I have the Colts keeping 4 safeties. Blackmon and Cross, they do keep Rodney Thomas II to be that 3rd safety, and then Trevor Denbo, another core special teamer. And I saw a lot of people when the news came out that Rodney Harrison Jr. was cut from this team. A lot of people were surprised by that. Drake, I really wasn't that surprised, because Rodney Harrison Jr. isn't a guy that plays special teams. And again, when we look at the back half of the roster, these guys that are fighting to make the team, they got to play special teams. Do I think the Colts bring him back on the practice squad? Yes, I do. But when it comes down to this number crunch time, you got to have guys out there to play special teams. Trevor Denbo is one of the best special teams players on the Colts. That is why he is on the team and Rodney Harrison Jr. isn't.
Yeah, and I like what you said about the 4, because we'll get to the obvious reason why they're a position that some people might forget about, a Pro Bowler here that we might need to get to. But Nick Cross, Julian Blackmon, Rodney Thomas, Trevor Denbo. Yes, Ronnie Harrison made plays. Yes, last season he was converted over from a linebacker to a safety, or from safety to linebacker, and made plays, and then he played safety again. But like you said, I think that they want a pure safety if they can have one. They want a guy that is just pure safety. You've already got Alubi, and you've already got Carlisle. They've got that handled at linebacker, that coverage spot. So that really doesn't leave any spot for Ronnie Harrison. And I think that at that point, if you do have to turn to a backup safety, I know this sounds crazy, but if it's a passing situation, especially, I'll take Rodney Thomas over Ronnie Harrison because he's more of a strong.
And if Ronnie Harrison is able to come back again on the practice squad and be there for you, if there's an injury that happens, you can very easily bring Ronnie Harrison back up onto the active roster. Patrick says, hot take, Rodney Thomas makes the 53 only to get cut 2 days later after a waiver claim for a safety. That's what's always so interesting about this time of year is the Colts are usually very active on the waiver wire, picking up some guys. We'll have to see if Rodney Thomas not only survives the 53-man cut down, but then survives after the waivers come in as well. And then finally, the specialist. It's always been Matt Gay, Rigoberto Sanchez, and Luke Rhodes. I know some people wanted to talk about there being a kicking competition with Matt Gay and Spencer Schrader. Yes, Matt Gay has struggled a little bit in the preseason, but the Colts are also paying him as one of the most expensive kickers in the league. And Spencer Schrader was an undrafted free agent. I think Spencer Schrader will go on and hopefully find another team. If not, I think the Colts bring him back on the practice squad. But there really wasn't any kicking competition. And you saw that in the final preseason game where Matt Gay really didn't kick any field goals and it was all Spencer Schrader. The reason for that was to get more film out there for Spencer Schrader so he can go and do another, basically an audition for other teams. So the three specialists were always going to be a lock, Drake.
Yeah, and like you said, Gay had some of those struggles, but he also during training camp practices and joint practices was nailing it, especially against the Bengals. So I'm confident in Gay to bounce back. I mean, you got to remember last season there were a couple games where he pretty much single-handedly won the game for Indianapolis with his leg.
Exactly. So that's our 53-man roster predictions for you guys. Let us know in the comments where you think we're completely off base, where you think we're right. We always appreciate the comments and the conversation when we do some predictions like these. Drake, let's talk about the Colts injury report as we head into kind of a bye week, I would say, before the Colts really start buckling down for the Houston Texans. Josh Downs, that ankle injury, good progress is being made by Josh Downs. Shane Steichen said yesterday that the Colts hope he's available week 1, which would be fantastic if the Colts could get Josh Downs back into the fold. I think the Colts, as Shane Steichen said, no timetable, so they are being cautious with this. But the fact that Steichen is even talking about that being a possibility, I think that just shows how close Josh Downs is to actually being there week 1. He's out of the boot, and he's walking without any limitations, and he's progressing very well in his recovery. Who knows? Josh Downs may actually be out there when the Colts take the field against the Texans.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you were hoping for, is that it wasn't too serious. It was just a minor setback. So that's a huge weapon to have out there week 1. And I will say, I'm not saying the Colts can't beat Houston without him, but it's going to be a lot easier too if number 1 is on the field.
Patrick, you absolute menace. Juju Brents is working his way back from his nose injury. Again, Shane Steichen said that Brent should be back next week. They're expecting him to be back to practice next week. And if that's the case, all things are go for week 1 to have Juju Brents back into the fold and completing that starting secondary for the Colts.
Yeah, and I mean, you only had 9 games last season. You had them at separate ends of the year. So I'm excited to see Brents, maybe get a little bit of revenge, hopefully, on the Houston Texans, because the last time he saw Houston, he got destroyed by Nico Collins.
Yeah, he did. Trey Sermon, on his way back from a hamstring injury, was seen at practice yesterday, kind of warming up on the side. So he is on track to be back from week 1. Tanner Bortolini is dealing with a toe injury. His status for week 1 still up in the air. But obviously, if Ryan Kelly is healthy, you probably don't even see Tanner Bortolini anyway. So, but something to monitor. And then Titus Leo was not at practice either. So, but the guys that are going to have the biggest impact, once the regular season comes along, like Downs, like Brent, like Sermon, those guys are on their way back. And it's good to see. And hopefully the Colts can be healthy with all 3 of those all three of those guys back in the fold come week one.
Yeah, you really don't want to walk into the opening game of your regular season against the defending divisional champions with any key injuries. So it sounds like Indianapolis right now is on the right track.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the latest Colts news and rumors, because we do have some roster cuts to talk about that have already been announced. So you're going to hear different terms here, guys. You're going to hear that guys were released and guys were waived. If a guy is released, that just means they have enough vested years into the NFL. So that way, as soon as they are cut, they are free to sign with any team of their choosing. Now, if a player is waived, he doesn't have enough vested years in the NFL, which means he is subject to the waiver wire. Which means through waivers, any team, as long as they're in the order, any team can pick up and claim that player before he is officially a free agent, and then can sign with any team. So the players that have been released so far are wide receiver Tyree Cleveland, Greg Ward, defensive end Derek Rivers, and then of course safety Ronnie Harrison Jr. And then the players who have been waived are quarterback Keaton Slovis, running back Demetric Felton, wide receivers Derek Silva, center Mikey P, because I can't say his last name. Mikey P, defensive end Levi Bell, linebacker Mike Smith Jr., cornerback Clay Fields III, safeties Michael Tutsi and Marcel Dabo, and of course Spencer Schrader, the kicker that I mentioned earlier. But Drake, outside of Ronnie Harrison Jr., I don't know if any of these names really surprised me. I didn't have any of these guys, including Ronnie Harrison Jr., making the final roster to begin with. But you will see quite a few of these guys back with the Colts as long as they go through waivers. You'll see these guys back on the practice squad.
Yeah, and there's a couple guys I'm sure that they're going to be looking out for. Probably the two safeties. Those guys really stick out, Michael Tutsi and Marcel Dabo. I think if they can get them back, they will.
Yeah, I agree. So 53-man roster cut down is tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern. We will know who the 53 Colts will be to start the season. We think we'll see kind of after all the waivers settle over the next couple of days. But Drake, that just means that it's really officially the end of the preseason when the roster cut downs are made, and all attention now switches to week one in the Houston Texans.
Man, it's finally here. I feel like we talked about the final season or the final regular season game for the Colts 2.5 years ago. It's awesome. But yes, I think that between now and tomorrow at 4 p.m., people expect complete hectic. That's what you should expect.
Yeah, it's always a fun time, and there's always a lot of news that comes out over these next couple of days. So that's our show for you guys tonight. Really appreciate everyone tuning in and talking Colts football, talking roster predictions with us. It's always a fun time. Shout out to our super chats, Truett, my beautiful wife Danielle, and my fantastic son Jack, and the CFO Patrick. We thank you guys so much for all of your support, and everyone else that joined in to talk Colts football with us tonight. If you haven't done so, please go follow us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts_SI on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Make sure you hit that bell so you know when Drake and I go live every Monday and Thursday night, whenever Noah goes live with the Shoehorn Podcast, so you never miss us. And then wherever you listen to us as far as podcasts are concerned, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review so we can reach other Colts fans just like you. Drake, I know you've been writing away as always. It seems like you've got 2 or 3 pieces that come out daily on horseshoehuddle.com. Tell the people what they need to go check out.
So I did a little bit of research and found out that FanDuel had some pretty interesting odds on the Colts winning the AFC South, so go check that out. And then there was an analytics expert, Warren Sharp, who does great work, actually had QB Jason Bean potentially as the best quarterback from the preseason. So go check that out as well. But he's not making the team, so sorry.
Definitely an interesting piece to take a look at. So yeah, definitely go check that out. Myself got a few pieces out there. Obviously, we talked to Anthony Richardson after the game against the Cincinnati Bengals, and he really dove into his performance, about talking about the first drive, the miscommunications, and how he's learning for the regular season season. So it was a really interesting conversation. We already went through my 53-man roster prediction, but if you want to see that in written form and where I kind of go into a little bit more detail, that's out there as well. And then this evening, I released a piece about DeForest Buckner and Laiatu Latu. We saw those guys together against the Cincinnati Bengals. That first snap that Latu was out there, he wreaked havoc, got a sack, and he was right next to DeForest Buckner. If this keeps up, these two could be unstoppable for the Colts defensive line in 2024 and beyond. Talked with both of those guys about what they see in each other as teammates. So you definitely want to check that out as far as everything else on horseshoehuddle.com as we get closer to the regular season. Go follow Drake at DWalsterDrake. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL, and we'll be back Thursday night to talk about predictions, more predictions. We're going to be talking about predictions for what we think Anthony Richardson's going to do, Jonathan Taylor, Laiatu Latu.
I'm getting excited.
And so much more. So we'll be doing all of our regular season predictions on Thursday night. Make sure you tune into that, Colts fans, but enjoy the rest of your week. Stay cool because it's a hot one here in Indiana, and we'll be talking more Colts football with you later in the week.